My name is Mark Hansen, and I'm with Westgate Bank. And it's been a pleasure for me to serve on the NBA Workforce Housing Task Force. My interest in this is what I see occurring in particularly outstate Nebraska and the housing crisis that we're having, that people do not have places to live, and we've got jobs to fill out there. And if we've got jobs, we need to have housing for people. Well, I'm actually from Lincoln, Nebraska, and part of my role there at the bank is that we actually provide credit to banks all over the state that are trying to finance homes in their communities. And so I've seen firsthand the challenges that those banks have had, and I felt it was important to support those banks because they're customers of ours. And if their communities aren't doing well, they're not doing well. And so by helping those banks, we're helping the communities. Well, I'm going to talk more about the region because, frankly, in Lincoln, I'll tell you that we think we have the adequate resources. We've got the contractors. While we've got some housing shortages, we've got solutions to solve those. But the issues in outstate Nebraska are significantly more challenging. Again, I'll say we've got the labor there, we've got the jobs in those communities, but the labor force doesn't have places to live. And so things like financing of lots or creation of lots, and then the builders to build the houses, and then the costs of those houses in outstate Nebraska is actually outstripping the costs of building houses in Lincoln and Omaha. That's a great question. I think there's always been a demand or a need for housing. I mean, you look back over time and all the different programs there are, that home ownership is kind of one of almost our fundamental solutions that we've had to make communities strong, because we know that if people have a place to live and they get invested in their community, that a lot of good things happen socially in that community. It lowers crime rate, it improves education for kids and future outcomes. So all those are good reasons to have housing, and so we've always invested in it and stimulated it. What we're seeing today, though, is probably after the financial meltdown, a lack of investment that took place over 5 to 10 years. And now we're in this place where we've got this gap that's been created, and we've got to step up our investment to catch up. Well, the banking industry, and I'll give our director, Richard, a lot of credit, because as he was traveling around the state and he started in his new position, he really identified this as something he was consistently hearing from bankers all over the state, that there was an increasing need and demand. And so he's the one that really originated our task force to deal with this, and we're in about our first 9 months of addressing it. And I think we've identified 2 or 3 things that need to happen, and the number one thing is helping communities get together and have local leadership, which is to be led by the bankers, the employers, and the city forefathers, to say we've got to reinvest in our housing stock because it hasn't been invested in for a long period of time, and we've got a demand there. So. I think there is, number one, helping communities and the leadership organize themselves to get that momentum. You know, all of us, particularly if we've got day jobs, have other things to do, but we've got to take time to do this. But I think the other thing that's going to happen is some kind of economic incentive, whether it's state legislation or federal legislation, to really bridge some of those gaps. I'll make an analogy and say that the way our state got settled originally was the Homestead Act in the 1800s, and that was an economic incentive to encourage people to come live here by, if they signed up and took the land and put some improvements on it, after 5 years they owned it. And I think we're going to need those kinds of what I'll call big picture, significant kinds of investments in order to really drive this forward, because I don't think it'll happen just on its own. From listening to the community bankers that are on the task force, it's clear to me that local leadership is the secret sauce. It's the differentiator, that when someone takes that leadership position and helps drive it forward by collaborating with the other partners in the community, something can get done and improve the community. And so I think leadership is the number one issue.